All right, so this is investing in doing Ecuador. This isn't doing Ecuador. This is investing in doing business in Ecuador. Let me just take a quick survey. Is anyone considering like getting into opening a business or anything entrepreneurial? Are people? Okay. All right, cool. We got some.
Kicking
Okay. All right. So there is some people.
Sorry, guys.
Not at all.
No worries.
You're good.
Australia was calling and couldn't get the wife off the phone.
It's funny, she threw you under the bus.
It's funny, you know, she's really worried we're going to buy something. She keeps saying this. She's like almost barking at us. Whatever you do, don't buy me. I want you to rent. Tell me you rent. I said, no, we're not renting anything. Well, you have to. You can't just go ahead and buy stuff. You don't do things like that. It's a strange country and it's unsafe. I mean,
Have I heard that?
Yeah.
All of us have.
I've heard that all.
That's my baby sister.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt, Gary.
No, you're all good. So this is investing in doing business in Ecuador. 30 seconds of credibility building since I am wearing a pink t-shirt. My background was in real estate investing in New York, and then I got here in 2013, opened Abundant Living Ecuador, started investing in residential development projects, have been involved in a number of businesses here, a number of different enterprises, learned the language obviously, learned the culture, really like the first 2 or 3 years pretty much got my ass kicked, learning. It's just so different, coming here with no Spanish and not understanding, no network, no relationships, and just not understanding how things work here. I came in with my sort of American attitude, coming from, New York, where the business infrastructure is excellent, right? And things are done a certain way and interactions happen a certain way. And you can sort of rely on the systems and the processes to function in a certain way. And when you see opportunities, because you're from, in my case, I'm from the States, right? So when you see opportunities, you kind of how to take advantage of them, right? There's not going to be like some weird cultural dynamic that gets you, that makes the opportunity that should have been great not great, right? And so I got whooped for the first 2 or 3 years, learning, building my network, learning Spanish, learning the culture, and just understanding how that stuff is done here. Brandon comes from corporate America. He was high up at General Mills, startup world as well, consulting. So he has like an actually legit U.S. business background as well. He's been here for a few years. Carl's been here longer than I have. Carl's also run a small food business here as well. Of course, the real estate stuff also. So that's kind of our background and the perspective that we're talking to you from. So everything in this country, I would say, when it comes to, and so I kind of have this broken up into 2 sections. I kind of have this broken up into doing business and investing in Ecuador, but there's obviously a lot of crossover between the two, so we'll jump around a little bit. Feel free to jump in with questions, as needed or as desired. But basically, just starting like super big picture, and this is true for just about everything in life here, but I think it really probably there's an extra layer of that or an extra emphasis on that when it comes to doing business or investing. Just nothing in this country is what you're used to. Like everything is a little bit different. And the devil really is in the details in these kinds of things. So back home, right, in the States, we've been a developed economy for a very long time. I don't know when there was the level of opportunity back home that there is here now, but it's got to be 70 years ago at least. We're a very developed economy. There's capital from all over the world in the U.S. looking for opportunities. The business culture is very, very strong. The regulatory environment is very, very strong. Everything kind of has a pretty well established functioning way of doing things, system, etc. And so really like back home, if you can find an opportunity that someone else either doesn't have access to or that you have some angle on that they don't have, or you have some inside information, or you have something where you have an advantage, that's really kind of the game back home. Everybody, for the most part, there's, of course, you can screw up execution back home too, but like everybody pretty much can execute to a high enough level for the most part that, that's really not necessarily where your advantage is going to be. Here, there's opportunity everywhere. Opportunity is not even exciting in this country. There's so much opportunity, it's ridiculous, right? Like literally the first year I was here, I had 50 ideas that were all like, huge ROI, multi-million dollar potential ideas. So what? Like it doesn't really matter. You need the capital and you need the team and you need to be able to execute. And so that's a totally different way of thinking about things, right? It's not like, ooh, how can I get information that they don't have so I can get to this opportunity faster? That's not the game here at all. The game here is, can I put the team together, put the capital together, put the team together, and actually execute well on whatever the thing is that you're interested in. There's so many opportunities, that's just not, you don't pay for them, it doesn't matter, it's sort of like there is no value here to ideas or those kinds of things. All of you could come up with lots of ideas here that would work. So just to understand that, it's just a very different playing field in that way.
Yeah, it's much less sophisticated, and it's much less, what's the word? Not developed. It's
Mature, really. Is it?
mature.
Yeah.
Mature. It's significantly less mature.
To execute well. is
Significantly
the
less mature, and significantly less sophisticated than the United States and Canada.
Yep. So, so just some basic frameworks in terms of if you're doing business here, just the playing field, right? So the tax code is super beneficial. Again, this is not a country that has a robust economy. This is not a country that attracts a ton of foreign investment. This is not a country that has a robust business culture and climate outside of a few areas, basically Quito, Guayaquil, maybe kind of Cuenca, kind of Manta, that's pretty much it. And so as a result, they're not looking to extract every penny at every turn from businesses. They're looking to attract businesses to open and do things, right? So it's a very beneficial tax code. No matter what activities we've done over the years, no matter what money we've made, we've paid almost nothing in taxes always. The tax code changes very frequently, but there's always new incentives that they put in that you can structure the enterprise around to take advantage of. So tax code is very beneficial. Regulations are very few and they're navigable. Now there is a caveat to that, which I'll get to in a second, but they're very few and they're navigable. Basically, and I'll get into this sort of in the what to look out for section, but basically there's a lot of red tape and there's a lot of sort of barriers to getting initial permissions. So that can be a total hassle. Once you have the permission, there's almost no oversight of any kind in this country. It does exist. If you're in mining, there's some oversight. Like there's a couple of industries, but in general, nobody's really going to be checking on you. Nobody's going to be inspecting. They're not going to be making sure you did it this way and not that way. And that so you have kind of free reign to a large degree once you have the initial permission for whatever it is you're doing. So that's also very different than back home. So regulations are few and navigable. Inputs are very cheap, right? So all of them, so labor, obviously, energy, of course. There's a whole added aspect to that of you're not going to be required to carry expensive insurances. You're not. So really compliance as well, right? So your compliance costs are going to be next to nothing in most cases. Really, it's just a few compliance costs for a accountant, and that's going to be about it for compliance costs. So overall, your inputs are going to be very cheap. So that's of course interesting, right? If you're in a position where you're interested in a business that's basically just producing something that's produced in other places for export, you're going to be able to produce it cheaper here than a lot of other places. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about things that work, things that don't work. So again, Ecuador, is a pretty young market in many ways. That means, again, there's opportunities everywhere. There's a growing expat community all over the country, not just here. So many places in Ecuador has gotten popular for expats all over the coast, and in Cuenca certainly, and Baños and other, Cotacachi and other places. So any businesses that cater to expats are always interesting. There are definitely goods and services that expats are looking for that they can't find. Those kinds of businesses certainly work, and they're easier for foreigners because we understand the foreign mind already. We understand what those people are looking for. And I would say in general, just sort of, I don't know if this is the right term at all, but I'm just going to call it like new economy services, which for the U.S. would be like 50 years old. Those kinds of things work here because they're almost like novelties. Thank you very much. That's the word. So in Loja, when I got here in 2013, right, Loja didn't look anything like it looks today. Loja then probably had 3 sort of trendy, modern-looking shops in the whole city. There's probably 300 now. That's happened in the last 10 years. Loja, when I got there was no such thing as like, for example, like a pet, not salon or something. Like, what do they call, where they grooming, yeah, or a hotel or something. Like, no such thing. Now there's several of them in Loja. Nice clothing stores, boutique this, boutique that, barber shops that like take care of you. They like, as a man, they do stuff that's like trend. They they look good, and there was no such thing as that. Now there's probably 8 of them in Loja. So all those kinds of businesses that sort of are 30 years old or more back home are new here in a lot of places. So those kinds of things do work. Novelty stuff are always attractive here to locals. People really do like the latest, newest thing. They'll check it out. Like, I really want to build a golf course. I don't know if I'll ever get to it or be able to, but like Lojanos will definitely be into it because they know about it, they will have heard of it, but they haven't ever played, and it'll be like a new thing, right? There's no
Check out Hawaii if you want to learn how to build one in this kind of terrain.
Okay, all right. Hopefully one day I will get to that point.
There's only like 7.
Yeah, there's a handful in the whole country. Yeah.
Right.
There's no bowling alley in Loja. There's tons and tons of things like that that would work. So
Drinking.
So things that don't work, right? So you don't ever want to, if you're going to open a business here that caters to locals particularly, you have to be very, very cognizant of consumer behavior and spending habits and not go against the culture in any way, because that will fail every time. I always use this same example. Maybe I used it with you guys already, but there was a number of years ago when I was living in Loja, a Subway sandwich shop opened up in the city, and I was driving with my wife, and I saw it, and I was like, 2 months. That'll be there for 2 months. And the reason I knew that was because there's no sandwich culture in Ecuador. They don't eat sandwiches. They exist, but it's like you see them at the airport, you see them as like a snack in a couple of stores, but there's no sandwich culture of any kind. No one knows what that is even. Like you're not getting an Italian hero anywhere that's decent or like.
So we need a deli is what you're saying.
Well, no, I'm saying we absolutely don't, but in Vilcabamba. Yeah.
When I first got here, Jesse was taking me out. It was probably a year after I was here, and he was taking me out. We were going out to a project, I think maybe in Tumianuma. I don't really remember where we were going, but we had a couple of Ecuadorian guys that work for Abundant Living, and they were coming with. So I stopped. Jesse picked me up from this cafe in town, and we're going to be out there all day. So I got bagels, like a chicken bacon ranch
and
bagel
sandwiches.
Sandwiches.
This is a foreign-owned store
from this place. So I got it for the 4 of us, and we're out there having lunch, and I give Jose and his son the bag for lunch, and they kind of took it out and looked at it, and they didn't know what to do. They're like, "What the hell is this?" I had no idea. Yeah, it's like, what is this?
And I turned to Brandon, and I'm like, they've never seen this before. and then I asked them, I'm like, they're friends of mine. I'm messing with them. I'm like, so what do you guys think? And they're just looking at me and looking at the sandwich. Right. So there's no sandwich culture, and then there's also just, again, the consumer behavior like really matters, right? Money velocity here is very slow. very, very slow. Money doesn't change hands quickly. People save their money. They save their money forever. They don't spend it frivolously. They don't spend it on showing. They don't spend it just to spend it. Folks will like literally, like this is super common in this culture. If people are going out, they'll go out. People like to go out. They'll go out. They'll go out 4 people, 6 people. They'll buy like one dish and split it, and then have a few beers and be there for maybe 4 hours and spend $16, right?
Is that why the portions are so damn big?
So nobody's gonna go and buy a $6, $8 sandwich for lunch when they're used to spending $2 to $3.50, on lunch, or eating lunch at home with their families, which is very common. And then people here don't go out for dinner unless it's an event. So like people, it's not that people don't eat out, they do, but that's like with the family, sort of an event, or with friends, an event. People aren't just like, hey, let's go out to dinner. That's really not a thing. Like people will go home and eat dinner at home. So the Subway was there a couple of months, and that was it. And again, if you're new here, I would have said at the beginning, great idea. There's no sandwich. They don't have that here. People will be into it. But so really study the culture, understand spending habits, consumer behavior before you get into a business that just has no chance because of the culture. Okay, super important. I think I covered this a little bit in the real estate presentation, but overseeing your affairs, or I would say not overseeing your affairs is a great way to fail quickly here. So, there is a little bit more of a culture here than back home of people taking advantage of other people. So, so hiring the wrong professionals and then assuming they've got it would be a very, very bad mistake. It's weird a little bit coming from where we come from, because where we come from, it's a little bit rude to like check up all the time. Like you hire a lawyer, or you hire a builder, or you hire, an engineer to do something or whatever. Like if you're kind of in his ass all the time, that's a little bit like, dude, what are you doing? Leave me alone. I got it. Like I'm the professional, right? Here you kind of have to do that. You really need to keep your business at the forefront of their mind. You need to constantly sort of maintain the relationship and just check in and make sure. Now, of course, over time, you're going to find the people you don't have to do that with. And we certainly can help you with that as well. But even with the people you don't have to do that with, you're going to check in a little bit more than you would back home. So just oversee your affairs, be very hands-on with everything. Of course, that means now, if you extrapolate out what that means, running a business, it means it's a much more hassle, right? It means there's more stuff that you've got to be more hands-on with, that takes time, that takes effort. It's pain, right? It's different than back home, where you can, okay, this guy's got that guy's got that, this person has that, I'm good. You're not really doing that here with almost anything. Hence why it's difficult to run a business here, right? Or one of the reasons. So, so yes, overseeing your affairs. Trusting the wrong people, getting bad advice. So that can bury you here, certainly. So just, there isn't a panacea, there isn't a catch-all way to avoid that. But just, tread lightly, ask questions, find out, get recommendations, get multiple recommendations, use your intuition, sniff it out, use your instincts, feel good about the people you're working with. If something doesn't smell right, it probably is not right, or you at least need to keep an eye to make sure. Now, there are I'll give you, a couple of tips here that is very different, that is hard to navigate. Like, quite frankly, it's just hard to navigate until you figure it out. People here don't communicate a lot, right? So, like, for example, if Brandon's the professional and I'm the person requesting his service, and I call him and I say, hey, I need X, Y, and Z thing done, and he says, okay, great, I'll get back to you in 2 weeks, and I don't hear from him for a month, that doesn't mean he's not working on it. But if something went wrong and he doesn't have the answer yet, 9 times out of 10, he's not going to tell me that. He's not going to like proactively, hey, I just wanted to let you know I'm working on this thing. This is what happened. It's going to take a couple more weeks. You're never going to get that message. So as a foreigner who's used to that, right, you start thinking, are they doing it? Is it happening? What's going on? Totally cool to check in. Hey, how's it going? Just checking in. At that point, you'll get the story. But what I'm kind of warning against is just assuming they're not doing it when they are, because oftentimes that's easy to do. It's easy here for things to just take longer than they should, just because everything here takes longer than it should, and then you don't hear from them, and then the mind starts going, what's happening? Are they doing it? Do they care? Are they ripping me off? Are they screwing me? Right? And then you don't want to get into that. So check, absolutely. Check in, call a meeting, sit in person, have the conversation, find out what's going on, and then if it all makes sense, give the time to continue. If you get to the point where you actually feel like, you know what, this person doesn't care about this and isn't doing it, thank you very much. I really appreciate your help. I'm gonna take this from here. That's fine too. Whatever you do, just don't get upset. People are gonna screw up. They are gonna drop the ball. You are gonna run into that no matter what. It's a smile and a handshake, and I really appreciate all your help on this, and maintain the relationship. You may need them again in the future, and you just don't want that. So that's going to happen. Like, there's no question. You live here long enough, that's definitely going to happen. Okay, so keys to success. So I wrote here 3 times, relationships, 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 and that really is everything here. Like, it's absolutely everything. It is the only way to have a successful life. Forget business, but certainly true in business as well. Again, this takes a little bit of time. So like we can fast forward some of that for you here, because we can sort of hook you into our network. And I say this, with no ego. It's true. Like, we kind of carry some weight here because we've been here a long time and people know us. So when we say, hey, this person, right, then that sort of will help you a little bit. But even with our help, like, it's going to take you some time to build up your network and to have those relationships. And that's the key piece to life here, because again, a lot of things don't make sense, especially at the beginning. This was very frustrating for me, the first couple of years. I thought you couldn't get anything done in this country. That I was completely convinced of that. I didn't have a network, and I was trying to do everything myself. And it's impossible. Everybody was telling me no for everything I was trying to do, and I didn't understand even what they were saying. And so I was just running into brick wall after brick wall. Once I established myself here, people knew me, I had the relationships, I spoke the language, I understood how to communicate and the way that communication works here. You can get anything done here easily. I actually find it much easier than back home, where, in New York, if you're going through the bureaucracy and they say, okay, now there's a 6-month waiting period, well, now there's a 6-month waiting period. Whereas here, maybe not. Maybe it's just a phone call and a meeting and a signature, and 6 months turns into 1 month or 1 week or 3 months or whatever. Those things are very, very, very navigable here, but only through relationships. Once people know you and they trust you, all the doors open. Until then, all the doors are closed. So the way that I go about that, right, is if I don't have the relationship, if people don't know me already, I'm never going to go in directly, like guns blazing, like, hey, I'm such and so, let's do this thing, right? I'm gonna use my network to find out who are the people that have the relationships there that can create the relationship for me, so that whatever I'm trying to accomplish is easy and is facilitated and doesn't turn into a quagmire. Quagmires here happen. Even me, I've been here a long time. I've done a lot of stuff and I have a lot of relationships, and I have quagmires still that take me time to solve. That's just part of life here. So, but again, you need those relationships to solve that. So, there's nothing really special you have to do to build relationships other than some of the stuff we talked about the other day, which is just be friendly, integrate, smile, shake people's hands, be friendly, don't piss people off. And that's about it. There's not really anything special to it other than that. Once people see that you're solid, then they'll start to give you their networks, and they'll invite you to their homes, and they'll start helping you with things that you need, and then you'll have their relationships, and then then you integrate, and then you have relationships, and then when you need stuff, you have those people to call, and that's just you're. Like if you're dealing with pretty much any problem you have here, you're pretty much calling someone as opposed to like going to an office and asking a question. And then eventually you may need to go to the office, or you may not, but you're going to always start with the relationship, because if they know you first, if they know who you are, if they've heard your name because someone called them about you, then it's a totally different conversation than if you're just walking in there. And they'll bend the rules here almost always, but not if they don't know you. right? So as long as they know you're not doing anything shady, then they'll do anything for you, essentially, right? But if they don't know you, then they don't know, and then they could get in trouble, and so then they're just kind of very like this about things, and so. Okay. So yeah, trust. I kind of talked about that. Trust matters. How to build trust. I kind of talk about that as well. People in general here have a little bit of a different perspective on life, right? So it's a very communal, familial society. So that changes the way people approach everything, including business. So, if this was shocking to me, right? So I come from New York, time is money, you sit down and you go, and it might be a 5-minute meeting that you're in, and that's it. It's like, okay, thank you very much, boom, right? And I'm used to that, and in New York, what's respectful is not wasting people's time. Like, that's literally how you respect people, right? Is you show up on time and you get right to the point, and then you say thank you and leave, and now that's a good interaction, right? Where I come from. So I get into Aloha, and again, I don't speak the language. I have a translator with me everywhere I go, and I'm trying to buy land, and I'm opening a business, and I'm doing different stuff. And we go into a meeting. This is one of 100 examples of this, but it's just one that stands out to me. We go into a meeting with the family, a very prominent family in Aloha. The main guy is the CEO of Caffrey Losa, which is probably the biggest business in Aloha. They're like a meat distributor. So we're going into the CEO's suite, and it's this beautiful office, and the whole family's there, and my lawyer's there, and it's like a business meeting. And we sit down and bullshit for like 45 minutes before it started. Like, literally, that might be an exaggeration. It was at least 30 minutes of small talk, none of which I understood, which was very uncomfortable. Before we talked business, right? And that's just the culture here, and that's just an example of sort of how people are oriented. It's oriented around relationships, family, people. So it's, you can bring your personal life into business relationships here, which is shocking, right? Like, back home, again, that would be kind of disrespectful. Here, somebody might be trying to get a cheaper price, and they're telling you about their personal situation. And back home, that would be like, whoa, you're crossing a line here, right? You're like trying to get money out of me based on your personal life. Like, right. Here, that's...
Yesterday, we had a necklace made, and that cost me a 20-minute conversation when it normally was just...
That cost me.
Right. Right.
I mean, he's a really nice guy, but all of a sudden I knew about all his addiction problems. He's a really cool guy. And, we saw him again later in the day, and he said, hey, how you doing?
There you go.
But no, it cost you that 20-minute conversation.
Yeah, right. And so it changes your mindset, like, of how you go into these meetings. You're going to talk about things from the standpoint of what it means for the person, what it means for you, what it means for the community, as opposed to, here's how much money we can make, here's what we can do, like, right? It's not, that's, everyone understands that's part of it, but it's like, that's not the perspective that you want to come from when you're having business meetings and things like that here. All right, what else? Culture and language. So, I mean, some of that we kind of covered, but if you're planning on doing business here, learn the language. Try and figure out the culture. Communication here is very subtle. It takes time. Like, there's no way to fast forward that. It's very, very subtle. People will use the same words that to mean yes or no or maybe, and it's all the same words. It's all through body language, tone, innuendo. There are laws here about talking bad about people. And I don't think that's actually really why people don't do it. But culturally, if you say to someone in Ecuador, hey, like, what do you think about such and so? And they're like, yeah, they're pretty good, right? Whoa, that was like a very strong negative opinion. Yeah, at all. Like, run. Like, that's like, I mean, that's like really negative, right? Like, nobody will ever tell you that guy's a crook. Don't do business with them. Like, you will never hear. If you're really friends with someone, like truly friends, of course they will, one-on-one. But like, in general, and so once you figure out the way that communication is, then okay, it's very clear. You understand. You're sitting down, you ask a question, they subtly tell you, but you understand what it means. But But that's going to take a little time to figure out. Like there's no really fast forward on that. But if you're going to do business here, you need to have someone who very much understands that stuff, or you're going to be very frustrated. So whether that's you just waiting a few years until you've picked all that stuff up, or it's a partner or someone that's working for you that truly understands how to operate here in those ways and understands the subtlety and the tones and the body language and all that stuff. That's just how communication is done here. It's very subtle. It's not the words. Okay, barriers to success in business here. So certainly the bureaucracy is one, red tape. So you can just run into quagmires here all the freaking time. So, it's like you need 4 permissions from 4 different places. None of them are in communication with one another. None of their rules match up. None of their requirements match up. This one's asking you for something from this one that one needs something from them before they can give it to you, but they can't give you that before you get that from them, right? Like you run into stuff like this all the time. And so again, you're going to solve this through relationships, and it's going to take time and effort, and it's going to be a hassle, no matter what, right? Like we have a full-time person who literally just solves stuff like this for us all day, every day. That's all she does. She's a magician. I've watched her in action. Like she will walk up to folks and put her hand on and be like, por favor, por favor. Like it's really funny, right? Like just watching how she moves. And worst case scenario, it's like $30 here, $30 there. But she hates to do that, so she will avoid that at all costs if she can. But she might have to go to the same office 25 times to get something solved. It's just the way it is here. So bureaucracy, red tape definitely can cause you some stress here, getting those permissions. Lack of relationships network is sort of a death blow here, pissing people off we talked about. There's a lack of business infrastructure in general in the country. So again, not in Quito, not in Guayaquil, more or less Cuenca. They're all done a little different, but there's not, again, all of those sorts of just take it for granted, like easy to do stuff back home is just harder here. Okay, that kind of covers the doing business section. What time is it? Okay. So let's move on to investing, unless people want to stop me on any of that stuff.
Do you drink?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Jesse, would you tell me if somebody's a crook? Just like that guy's a crook.
No, 100. I mean, I'm from where you're from, so I have no problem. But
You say he's probably a crook.
right.
You guys do everything something. I really kind of wouldn't go with that guy. Maybe somebody else instead of leave that dude alone. He's a piece of shit. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
We have a lot of code language in hospitality when somebody calls for a reference.
Right.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
You never smack talk them, but you just let it be known that they probably don't want to hire that person
Right.
without actually saying that.
Right.
An example is, you guys asked me today about English-speaking taxi drivers.
Yes.
And I gave you a very subtle kind of,
It was a good answer. Yeah.
I think it was very subtle. It was the Ecuadorian way. I have some really good taxi drivers I would recommend and don't really speak English. Some of them do. You have a good speaking English taxi driver.
I have a couple, yeah.
Yeah, we can send you those numbers as well.
Yeah.
But some people would,
Yeah.
you have to be careful as well.
Yep. All right, so investing in Ecuador. So again, some of this we covered. I'll go very brief on the history, but so and part of this, of course, is just opinion, obviously, right? And my opinion. I mean, I think maybe this whole group probably has some similarities in terms of their outlook on the world that brought you guys here. That brought me here 11 years ago. But sort of, my hypothesis when I moved here was, the world is changing, the investment landscape is changing, and there will come a time where the value of food and water and climate and arable land and safety and all those things will start to be realized in the world. And I think we have started to see that over the last few years. And I continue to hold that hypothesis into the future. But that's kind of what brought me to Ecuador. the year-round warmth, the growing season. I was interested in more freedom as opposed to less, those kinds of things. And to me, that does kind of tie into the Ecuador story when it comes to investing, right? So you have a country that's super rich in natural resources, one of the most natural resource-rich countries on earth, one of the more sparsely populated countries as well. Again, we've talked about the climate, all those different things. So it's an interesting place because, again, it's very not exploited to this point as also, right? So going back to sort of the opportunities piece, and we covered this a little bit in the real estate stuff as well, but Ecuador has had a very, very tumultuous history, right? So currency collapse in 2000, political instability up until 2006, and so Ecuador has basically been an uninvestable country, lack of infrastructure as well. Ecuador has basically been an uninvestable country by both locally and internationally for most of its history, right? So you have a few industries, bananas obviously, and a few others that have been here a long time, mining and some other things, and in a few places, right? In a few areas where the infrastructure was good enough to do those things and get your product to market and things like that. But in general, Ecuadorians have been very reticent about investing in their own country. So Ecuadorians will buy land in Florida. They'll buy rental homes in Florida. They'll put their money in Spain. They'll put their money in other places because they're concerned about political instability, right? They're concerned over the course of Ecuador's history about monetary and political instability, and rightfully so in many cases. And so people here tend to think pretty short term in terms of investments, right? So people don't go into businesses here, Ecuadorians, I'm talking about locals, don't tend to go into businesses that have 10, 20, 30-year timelines in terms of, needing some time to pay off and things like that. They'll look for stuff that's 2 years, 3 years that they can sort of calculate out, well, I think I've got 4 years of stability here, right? So then they'll get into something that they think can pay off in that period of time. So relatively under-invested in country. So let's see. Let me see where I want to go.
Yeah, and something to consider with that is we keep saying Ecuador the country, and it is, but relative size, it's more like, think of it as like a state, or from the United States. It's like the size of Colorado, so it's not a very big country. So when you think about the investability of Ecuador, you don't see any institutional money from overseas because it's too small. Like, the market is too small. It's not large enough for them to move institutional money in. They can't get the return. They need a bigger market. So it's kind of in a nice sweet spot for normal people like us that if we see opportunity, we're not getting cut out by that big money, that institutional money yet. Now, I think there'll come a day and time where eventually that institutional money, it doesn't matter if the opportunity's there. Eventually they're going to put chunks of money in Ecuador too. But like right now, because of the things that Jesse shared and the relative size of the country, there's a nice opportunity for regular folks like us that doesn't exist many other places in the world.
Yep. And just sort of adding to that for a second too, because of the size that Ecuador is and because of the time we're in with so much instability around the world, including in the debt markets and the financial markets and so on and so forth, if we were to have a flood of capital into Ecuador, prices would change really fast because there's a very small amount of usable land in this country. Again, it's a very small country. Half of it is the Amazon. Right? So literally 50% of the land mass of Ecuador is the rainforest, which has 2% of the population. Then we have the mountains, most of which are very steep. And there's some flat land in the mountains, and then there's the coast, and that's it, right? So, if the world sort of wakes up to some of these ideas about securing resources and places that are more pristine and have better soil and air and water and all those kinds of things, and capital starts pouring in, these properties that right now no one wants, basically, right, where you can still pick up 200 hectares for, $200 grand or $500 grand or $100 grand or whatever whatever, depending on where it is and what it is. I mean, those prices are going to change very, very, very fast if we ever, if we see sort of some of those more problematic events or more, scary events or whatever play out. Okay, so let's see. So I talked a little bit about the history. So pretty much, we've only had, let's say 2000, it's really 2000, probably 7 or 8. So where are we, 24? Someone do math for me, 16 years, yeah?
Sure.
Yeah? We've had somewhere around 16 years that Ecuador has had both political and monetary stability. So that's it, right, in terms of how long it's been an investable country, and also that infrastructure has been up to par, and you could even argue 2013 for infrastructure. So this is a new place, right, for investment capital, and so that mindset is changing, right. So we're seeing now projects that normally would have only happened in a few places in the country start to happen in other places. We're seeing that development now as Ecuadorians say to themselves, okay, I have now what I need to be able to do other things, and also foreign capital starts to look at it as well, right? So we do have foreign capital now in the country doing some really interesting projects in agriculture and in other things in places that they have not traditionally been done. That I expect that to accelerate a lot in the coming years, because again, it's some of the cheapest arable land in the world. It's very, very inexpensive here, arable land, and it has, again, no winter, cheap inputs, cheap labor, so on and so forth. So it's very much primed for investment in those ways. To Brandon's point, the scale of it does keep some players out, but still that is increasing and will continue to do so for sure.
6:30 almost.
Okay. So outsized return on ROI opportunities here are everywhere. They grow on trees, here in Ecuador. But it wasn't very good. But yes, you can make 100 to 300% ROI opportunities here are everywhere. Like that's very easy here. Again, the onus is on execution. The capital in this country is scarce, right? So if you that's a huge advantage in Ecuador, right? So if you're capitalized and you can put in a few $100,000 into something, or $500,000 or $1 million or whatever into some project that you're interested in, you're in the 1%, right? You're in a unique position to be able to take advantage of the landscape here. Again, a very different playing field than back home. Let's see. Okay, I talked about all of that. Yeah, so that's pretty much mostly good enough for most of this. So from my perspective, definitely there are some interesting opportunities in agriculture in this country. You do need to know what you're doing. So having the expertise, I think, is really, really important. So like if again, you're going to find. You could take the same project that they're doing in somewhere in California and just do it here for 10 to 30% of the cost, and it's essentially just an arbitrage play, and your taxes are going to be less, and so on and so forth. But yeah, again, you got to be able to execute. So you need to have really somebody who can run things well here locally, and then also the expert on the agriculture. So I am a fan of agriculture. Real estate for me is the other obvious investment opportunity here, both just as a buy and hold opportunity for arable land. Essentially, would be the way I would look at it, and also subdivision opportunities. Those are fantastic. Anywhere in the world, you can make money on that, but here there's an interesting sort of dynamic in the market where you've got a percentage of the world's population looking for food security, water security, good community, safety, year-round climate, those kinds of things, and you don't have an understanding yet of how to provide that, and then you also have rural land being undervalued in Ecuador. So it's like locals are not looking for that. Locals are moving to the city. So you can buy rural pieces of property in this country and bring what a percentage of the world's population is looking for, and offer that, and make there's amazing returns on that in that type of business here as well. obviously, people make money in mining. I don't think that's probably all that interesting to anyone here. Yeah, I don't know. It kind of covers most of the things that are interesting to me anyway.
Yeah, how about questions?
Yeah.
Anybody questions?
Sleepy.
Yeah, definitely got.
So,
Close time, yeah.
so like, I was thinking if I was going to start like a machete sharpening business or something,
Yeah.
we'll just kind of like go around and say, hey, or whatever. Kind of, I probably wouldn't make a ton of money, but
No.
could I show that like as a loss or a tax write-off or whatever if I open a business? And I'm guessing like a quarter per machete, maybe. I don't know if that's steep or not, but you know.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't need a tax write-off for what? I mean.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Basically, I was just looking for something to do, but.
Well,
I was just throwing
right,
it out there,
right.
but-
Well, like, are there any government
Are there any
incentives if you
incentives, like-
present them with a plan?
Yeah, I mean, there are.
Right, so,
You know, you
not
could,
really.
for 3 years, you don't have to start the LLC, but everything that's an expense towards that business is a write-off.
Right. Yeah, so
It's money for up to 6 years before they're gonna give you crap.
Yeah, so they do have, there are all kinds of incentives here in the tax codes. I couldn't tell you what they all are, but there's quite a few preferred industries. Tourism is one of them. Agriculture is one of them. They have businesses that are tax exempt for 10 years based on the industry you're in. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff like that. I'm not an expert on that, but yeah.
Is it a safe assumption that most of these folks prefer cash because, we just don't report that?
Yeah, they also, they don't, in this country, it's very interesting, right? So in this country, like in the States, the big guys have the advantage and the little guys, kind of have the regulators and the IRS up their butt all the time. It's the opposite here. So if you run a small business here that doesn't make a ton of money, they leave you alone completely. You've got to get to some higher thresholds before they're even interested in anything. Like no one's coming after small businesses here in this country at all in any way. They make the licenses easy. They don't even ask you to report any taxes up to, I think it's $12,000 or $15,000. And then once you start reporting, depending on what business you're in, they keep it very, very simple until you start making real money. So yeah, small businesses here are they're much more punitive to large corporations here. They have some very very punitive tax laws for some of the larger corporations. And when they're looking to take, when they need like one-time inflows of cash, they usually go after the largest corporations.
And if you think about it from the big picture, Ecuador's on the U.S. dollar, but they can't print the currency like we do in the States. So a lot of their printing is just remittances. In a way, it's people from Ecuadorians from the States that are sending U.S. dollars back home, but they can't actually print currency. So, and from that perspective, the government and all these different agencies that oversight, they have to be run more like a business. They can't run year-over-year deficits because they can't fund it. So the resource is much smaller. So to Jesse's point, the IRS doesn't have 10,000 million agents to go after every little person and their tax stuff. So they have a small portion of agents because their resources are XYZ here, and they can only allocate it there. So there's no bang for the buck for them to go after the little guy. They're going to go after where the money's at because that's where the bang for the buck is. And that's the same with all, it's kind of the underlying theme behind a lot of what you've probably learned this week with regulation and enforcement of laws or rules, and there's the resource isn't there because unless it truly generates revenue for the government of Ecuador, they don't take the time and effort or have the resource to devote to it if it doesn't generate a return for them. So when you're thinking through stuff around business, just think about it from that perspective that the government isn't coming after the little guy here at all. There's no resource.
Sorry, just real quick. Every new president every time announces a bunch of new rules that make the smallest small business make it easier for the smallest small business operators. It happens literally every time there's a new president. Give you just a quick example. So my wife makes kombucha. You guys, I think, got one in the backpack. So it used to be that to get not the license, the like the sanitation permit or whatever,
Right.
was like this whole process, right? And then every president that's come in over the last like 10 or 8 or 10, 12 years has made it easier and easier till now. They give you a temporary one without you doing anything for like a year or two, and then and then after that, you have to like, I don't know, fill out some paperwork. It's like nothing. Like she's never had to take a class, have an inspection, like nothing. And she's had these licenses for multiple years now. They really do like help small businesses here, especially like those very, very small businesses. So.
And that's also the caveat. The caveat is to have the relationship to understand. So like on some of those types of products, understand who you're eating food from, who you're drinking,
Right.
because it's
never
easy
know,
to be able to do that. So you want to understand where it's coming from and what the process is. Yeah.
So we go. Oh, sorry, you had a question, and then
I
yeah.
have a quick question. For us coming down, we're basically losing 40% on our dollar because
Right.
Canada's going
Yeah.
to shits.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced at some point the US dollar is going down the tubes too. So, yes, so what, and that's why I guess why a lot of us are here. So what happens to us and others, in US citizens who have US dollars here and the dollar goes tits up?
It's a great question. So I actually had that in here. I skipped that section, but yeah. So I mean, and this is all speculation, right? I'm just giving you my opinion. Brandon and Carl may have different ones.
That's what we're looking for.
Yeah. Okay. So here's how I look at that. So Ecuador, and we've actually in a couple of the podcast episodes
gone through this.
kind of tried to talk about this because it takes some time to like talk about it well. But even though Ecuador uses the U.S. dollar, because it doesn't have a printing press, it essentially functions as a different currency. So it has a different value, right? So your dollar here goes a lot further than your dollar in the States, even though it's the same dollar.
And also, just to interject for a second, you have different costs of living in the States. So when I mention, think of Ecuador as a state or in the cost of living in New York is much different than Southern Georgia. Accept it. Maybe that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Just don't want to accept it.
What about gold and silver? Does that have any place down here in Ecuador?
It does. You can buy it. People don't commonly. There's not a culture of that here, but it is available. You can buy it. You can buy it in Loja.
I'm thinking if you bring it down, would it be usable in a crunch kind of thing down here?
Who knows? I mean, I would imagine that will be similar to anywhere in the world in that kind of environment, but your guess is probably as good as mine.
And here, something like that, hard physical commodity assets like that, I think Joel mentioned, if you do bring that down, you're going to want to have that, you're not going to want to let someone else store that for you. So that's where you're going to want to have, what did you call it? Trap safe. You're going to have a hidden safe, and then you're going to have your fake safe. And your fake safe may has a piece of something in there, or a little bit of metal, some silver coins or something, junk silver, whatever. But your stash is truly hidden somewhere.
The Ecuador is very it's very not contradictory, contrarian. Ecuador is very contrarian, right? So I actually think asset prices, especially like land here, I think would be very good for land here if we have negative global events in the financial markets or otherwise. And we've seen that a couple of times, right? So when COVID happened, we had a flood into rural Ecuador, right? So a flood for here, which again is not...
Mayan calendar, too.
2012, the Mayan calendar, that's right. So, if we have a shaking in the global financial markets, land prices here are going up. Even if it's the dollar, maybe there'd be a month or something or a couple of months where there's some uncertainty there, but once that plays out, you're gonna have way more demand for rural land in Ecuador. So I'm very comfortable in holding that asset here, regardless of what happens in that environment.
Okay, cool.
You got something?
I was just gonna add, even Canada doesn't hold just Canadian dollars to balance the risk. So I'd say just have a bunch of everything, and that's the best you can do. Because if U.S. dollar collapses, it's a bad day. That's like a bunker day anyway, right?
Yeah, wherever you are in the world.
Buy some land, invest in a business like a supermarket or food producer, so that's always valuable. Some metal, some whatever you want. I'm not going to mention Bitcoin. Exactly. But I think just diversification is the best you can do. Even on holding it all in one account, right? I do have a bunch of U.S. dollars, like two banks, two countries, two places.
So go ahead. Yeah.
So
We're coming down here, we're both skilled trades, have our licenses and stuff like that. They don't trade.
They don't what?
They don't trade.
The licenses? Well, they don't require licenses here for most trades.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Can I come down here as a electrical engineer, do electrical work and not?
Yes.
Fill out lots of red tape?
None.
Can anybody come here and do end of life care without being a registered?
Oh, and yes, you were asking about that. I saw a post I'm going to send you about that. But yeah, yes, the short answer is yes. I don't know specifically end of life care if they have any licenses.
Necessarily be
Or
limited to
consulting.
that.
Yeah, no, yeah, they don't have. Yeah, there's almost no rules about any of that stuff. If you have like super specific questions, we can ask a lawyer. But yeah, none of the trades, to my knowledge, have any required licenses. Yeah.
Does anybody need to go back to the room before we head out to dinner?
Well, I take it it's raining.
Yeah.
Rain jacket or something.
So
We can continue the conversation at dinner, but Daniel's going to be here in 5 minutes, so if you guys need to run. Yeah, I don't know.
well, I was just going to talk about investing with us.
Yeah, we ran out of time.
You made me run out.
You're gonna walk all the way to the room and run?
I guess I could finally use my raincoat.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. You want to? Yeah, let's do that right now if you want. Yeah.
Hey guys, we're here in Vilcabamba with the Abundant Living team. To learn more about our next retreat, click the link in the description down below. From our family to yours, welcome to Vilcabamba. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel right here. Check out our real estate channel right here. For content that you will absolutely love, click right here. And if you want to know how we got here, click here.